Welcome to Lighting the Educational Flame, created and produced by educator and author Mark Hoberman, owner and director of Grade Success Tutoring. The purpose of this program is to offer our listeners a variety of stories dealing with many interesting topics surrounding education. It is our hope that students and parents alike will benefit from the wide range of topics, including study skills, test prep, anti-bullying, sports, music, and more. We hope you enjoy our show, Lighting the Educational Flame.
Hello and welcome to the video podcast, Lighting the Educational Flame, brought to you by Grade Success Education on the NETV network. I'm Mark Hoberman. Our guest today is actress Sheila Houlahan. Sheila, welcome to Lighting the Educational Flame.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Before we get into your background, I have to say that part of what Grade Success does, we're also a tutoring agency for 27 years, and I saw a really funny clip of you speaking at a comedy club, and you mentioned tutoring, and you never mentioned my company. So I just want to say there's no hard feelings. And
you guys probably would have helped me out a lot. I mean, I worked with, I may not be a case that can get help. You know what I mean? I worked with a great guy, and even then, the narrative is so compelling for math problems. How do you possibly focus on the problem itself?
Yes, absolutely. And the truth is, I'm an English teacher, 30-something years, and a retired English teacher. But math, I was lost when they said, and here's today's lesson. That was it. After that, I didn't understand. So I'm listening. I'm like, oh my God, this sounds like she's reading from my playbook. But I hear you on that. But definitely saw that. So I know I announced you and introduced you as an actress, but you're so much more than that. And as I said when we first talked earlier before this started, that you have the resume of a much, much older professional. And why don't you start off from the beginning? Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your background and how you became involved in acting?
Yeah, absolutely. So my family tried with all of their might to get me into STEM. I actually went to a school that was purported to specialize in STEM. So needless to say, after all of their best efforts to get me into math or science, I just immediately gravitated towards art and acting and creating. It's something that I've always loved. It's certainly not something that I allowed myself to consider as a real possibility until I was an adult. When you're a kid, I don't think enough time is left. We're in such a rush to get kids to get good grades, to get into good middle schools, get into good high schools, that we never really have time for them to be just kids anymore. And I think kids more than adults need that stillness to be able to figure out, who am I, what interests me, and what do I want? Like, I taught high schoolers music for a couple years, several years ago, and I was really compelled with how little time they had. And I'm sure all of our parent listeners out there can relate that your kid goes to school for 8 hours and then they're drowning in homework. They never really have time to explore interests, right?
Absolutely.
I remember one student, I was teaching them music history, and one student was like, listen, I'm going to be real with you. She's a senior in high school. She was like, I'm trying to be a doctor and I don't really see how this serves me.
Yep.
And I was like, understandable. Like, I'm not going to take that personally, because that's not on me.
Right.
Like, that is the system failing you and not giving you the time to figure out, who am I and what do I want? We don't necessarily allow our kids to have the time to be explorers. You can look at life as, I'm just trying to hit all the goalposts and get it right, or you can look at it as, I want to be an adventurer, an explorer on my journey and figure out what's fun. And really, that's what happened with me in my career. I gravitated towards music at a really young age, started working professionally as a musician at around like age 7 through my whole childhood. So growing up, I was juggling, prep school and then working as a musician after school. So I remember Mondays were my busy day, and I remember getting up at 6 a.m. and I wouldn't get home till 8 or 9 p.m. and then I'd have to do homework. I know. Yeah, a lot of young kids now. Kids out there have that.
Yes, but they're so overextended. But your music was your instrument. I know you're a singer. So was that your instrument? Did you ever play?
That was my instrument, yes.
Did you ever study anything? I know a lot of singers study a little
piano.
Yeah, just
basic composition, all that. I tried harp for a couple of years, and I realized I just did not have the constitution. As a 12-year-old, you're like, ooh, I want to do something that makes me look like a fairy princess. And then you try it and you're like, this is an actual skill that takes time.
Right.
No, thank you.
Sure.
But yeah, so as an actor, it wasn't really until almost the end of college that I even bothered to give it a try. I took an acting class as a whim with my best friend. We were living together in New York City where I was going to college.
Sure.
And we took a acting for camera class on a total whim because it was the exact opposite of what she and I did. We did musical theater and opera,
right.
where, you know, you're standing on a stage in this giant hall, you're trying to tell this story to 3,000 people. So we loved the challenge of what would it be like to tell a story when you have like a foot of space that you're working with. So it was a hobby. And it really, like, when I think back, that was the first time that I allowed myself to have a hobby. Like, what if we just try this for fun and it doesn't matter if it goes anywhere?
And look where it went.
Yeah, it really went somewhere. And I'm lucky. Things took off faster than I could have ever imagined. I started kind of doing like student films and hobbyist things for fun. And I remember the first time I had to choose between a music gig and an actual paid acting gig. And I went with the acting one because I realized, well, this is what I always wanted to do.
Right.
After college, I really approached life from the perspective of there's no rush. So I might as well just try things that sound good while I'm also working and paying the bills and supporting myself. It's always about, I've always had the approach of I'm going to try this kind of like a science experiment and see if I like it, you know, sort of compile the data, go what feels good, what definitely does not feel good, and go from there. And that mindset, I think, is why I was able to develop the resume that you spoke of, that which thank you so much for saying such a sweet thing. It's
so true. But you know, what I'm hearing also is, I know you said your parents really pushed you for STEM or something. I've taught so many kids through the years and tutored so many kids through the years. And it's great that you either had the ability or at some point, some kind of support to follow your dream, because a lot of kids are forced into things. They're forced into baseball, or they're forced into acting, or they're forced into, I can't say how many people are living their dreams through their kids in the stands. And, you know, it gets ugly sometimes at some of these things. So it's great that you had that. And, you know, we are an education-based show. And I know the parents are watching and kids are watching. So you talk about one gig to another gig, but could you walk us through the good, the bad, the ugly of the audition process?
I think that this is something that every young person can really benefit from trying, but it's about how you go about it. There is nothing that can be absolutely as ground shaking to your sense of self as an audition. Because here you are putting your full self out on a platter and going, how do you like me now?
Right.
And the answer might be nope, which
Right.
it's hard not to take that personally.
Definitely.
But I think I've auditioned thousands of times, and having to go through that, I can walk into any job interview and I'm not afraid.
Right.
You know, and I think that in and of itself is a reason why I would encourage to have parents try their kids. Have their kids try a variety of activities like that. Like send them out on an audition, but lower the stakes. Instead of being like, you have to book this Coca-Cola commercial, why don't we make it like, this is a weird thing. Let's see what happens.
Right.
Who knows? Because then
Absolutely.
there's no losing, you know? Then it's like, well, worst case scenario, nothing about your current situation changes. Best case scenario, a lot can change for you. Maybe you get an extra paycheck that you weren't considering that year.
Right.
But either way, what I love about performing, and specifically why I love auditioning, is you're learning how to walk into a room confidently saying, here's what I can do. Here's how I can help your vision. And here's who I am.
That's
It's
excellent.
just an incredible confidence builder.
It's great. And the kids need that. I have to tell you that when I was in school, many, many years ago, as a student, we never had a speech class. And in the school district where I taught, 25 of my 33 years, the high school, you could not graduate without speech. And what a great thing, because I have to tell you that even though now I'm a motivational speaker, an author, I get in front of hundreds of people, I never would have passed that speech class. Because when I was a kid, I'm talking 15, 17, I didn't want to go to the bathroom because I knew when I came back and opened the door, all eyes would be on me. And then it came the year when I had to teach speech. And what an eye-opener that was for me. But just the fact that you talk about the confidence of going in there, and it's not just about landing the gig and how do you like me now, which is what you are doing. It's really the confidence booster. So I love that. And to come from a person, I hate to keep mentioning the age factor, but again, with your impressive resume, how from whenever you started this, and it didn't sound like you started when you were 6 years old, like some of these people read about in 90 commercials, how have you kept so busy in your field in such a short amount of time?
You know, I just look for every opportunity. I think when you go through, I think it's all about the mindset that you have when you're pursuing any sort of project, especially when it's something you're passionate about. And I always go back to how can you lower the stakes, right? So I think I have seen a lot of actors who spent top dollar to go to one of the top conservatories, and the energy that they walk into the room with is, I need to get a return on my investment. My parents want me to get a return on my investment. If you're going to try any sort of entertainment-based career, sports-based career, the first nail in the coffin is when you're trying to get a good ROI. You may never, you know? And so if that means that going and studying that at college is not the right move for you financially, I think you actually can have the opportunity for more success doing that. By never studying acting traditionally, by never going to an acting school,
Right.
I had nothing to lose every time I walked in because I didn't invest very much in it.
Right.
And therefore I could show up fully in a spirit of, how can I help you? Rather than in a spirit of, please give me money so I can justify my choices, right?
Right.
And I think even that little shift makes all the difference. And it definitely made searching for opportunities fun too. Because again, there wasn't that pressure. I think that is the trap that we all fall into as young people, as kids, and certainly as parents as well, is, well, I want to make sure that this time and money and energy was worth something. But I think if you can just dial back on those stakes a little bit, you'll remember that this is fun, that this isn't life or death. We're not heart surgeons, you know, we're doing something silly and fun that brings people joy. And if you're not able to show up in a joyful spirit, why would anybody want to watch it, right? So I think first of all, it's about lowering the stakes. And the second of all, I looked into anything that could possibly provide leads. That turned into talking to anybody who I respected and reaching out and asking for mentorship. I think most people would be surprised how willing people are to share their expertise and knowledge.
Right.
I think
that's networking. That's just networking. You can do that in business. You can do that in what you did. And people really are more approachable than some people would think. And you can gain so much from that. And I love your mindset of it. It's like a non-competitive situation. However, I want to ask you about a competition you were in, which I believe is the American Protege International Voice Competition. So what was that like? Because you're someone who goes in with the great mindset of, let's dial it back. You're one of the few people I've ever heard who hasn't said, let's dial it up. And it really,
well, what happens when you dial it up? You know,
a lot of pressure, a lot of stress.
Yeah. I mean, and that goes like, you know, when we raise children with a competitive, and this makes me think of my own voice students. I taught with a local music program here in Seattle for 2 years. It was actually the program that I was brought up in.
Okay.
And the things that I always wanted to share with parents were, one, why are we teaching them to be competitive? What is gained by being competitive? Because really, when you teach your kids competitive, you're teaching them scarcity. There's two types of mindsets we can fall into. We can fall into, there's not enough job, you got to be the best, you got to do your best, cut all the other kids down, which raises sociopaths. And then there is the other way, which is like, there's plenty of work for everyone. There's an abundance of opportunity. Right. If you are there at the right place at the right time with the right skill set, it will happen for you. And I think that just takes the pressure off kids so that they can actually be present in the moment.
Right. And that's hard for some parents to do. Speaking as a parent, you know, it's not always so easy to do. So what was your experience at the voice competition at the American Protege International?
You know, I just walked in with lowered stakes and was like, it doesn't matter what comes of this. Again, I think if you always go back to worst case scenario, nothing about my life changes, then you realize there's no work. There are very few things in life where engaging in it is going to make you worse off, you know?
Right, sure.
For most things, it's like, great, nothing changed. I went into plenty of competitions where I just fell straight on myself and like did not do a good job whatsoever, and then came away from the experience laughing, because that's all it really is. It's just another story, right?
True. Yep.
So it's not about like, I have to be the best. It's about like, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to be present in the moment. I'm going to have fun with it. I'm going to tell a story from my heart. And no matter how it resonates or doesn't resonate, that's it. And it was great. I mean, I ended up winning that division, and I got to sing at Carnegie Hall for the first time as a soloist, which is incredible.
Amazing. Absolutely incredible. You know, you talked about not being the traditional person who goes to at a young age singing, acting, and all that, but you had some education, you had some training. What was your education and your training per se with acting, singing, or both?
Well, with acting, I didn't really start for both of them. I would say I started both of them in sort of like extracurricular studying, if you will. I think most parents do that too. They're like, well, does my kid even like this? Like, am I going to be shelling out top dollar? Let's see, put them in a summer camp. Let's see if there's any aptitude or joy whatsoever in this practice. So for both of those, that's how it started for me. For acting, I've never had formal training. I've just gone to sort of like private studios where it's a teacher teaches their method in an acting class. And I've always taken enough to be able to have my own conceptions challenged. But then a really important part of training is actually not being inundated with teaching, like having time to step back and go, okay, well, now I'm not going to study with the teacher for a couple months. Let it integrate into my own core process. Because at the end of the day, you have to drive your own ship, right? Or else you're just an imitation of all your teachers. You're not your own voice. And same thing with music. I did get formal training in college, but prior to that, there was 12 years of an extracurricular sort of professional performance group that I went through. So the training, you know, while we were doing professional gigs, a lot of the training was still kind of fun in nature, which let it be something that I could explore and enjoy doing. I think fun is so important when you're trying a venture, whether you're a kid or an adult. It has to be fun.
Absolutely. And I've seen, look, you're an actress, you're a singer, you do comedy. And from what I've seen, I have to say, it's definitely not jack of all trades, master of none. Any clips I've seen, I usually do my homework before I interview someone. If someone said you're interviewing an up-and-coming comedy star and I saw that clip, I'd say, yeah, I am. You're interviewing an actress. I saw several of your monologues, and it was just incredible. And then, so any of the things you do you consider yourself an entertainer, or you seem to have so much passion? What is your fit? Are they all tied? The singing, the acting, the comedy, are they all intertwined and make you Sheila Houlahan? Because that's how I see it. But you know, I'm asking you. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, it's exactly the same. I see myself as a storyteller. I love stories. I love hearing stories. I love engaging in stories, and I love telling stories. You know, when we all sit down to gather around our favorite show du jour, right? Like everybody in the nation is watching the hot TV show.
Right.
You're all drawn to the story being told because it's relatable on so many levels. And I think so much of the human experience can be boiled down to story, and so much of universal human experience is transmitted best through storytelling. That's what I'm passionate about. So long as it falls into that storytelling medium, I'm drawn to it.
That's great. And storytelling, historically in your life, has been a lot of times with an audience, and now we have the pandemic, so it has totally changed the way things look, for lack of a better term. So how have you been coping with and preparing for the future through this muddied water of COVID-19?
Well, there's a couple things that have been going on, and I'm going to have to lead with a slight tangent to get to your actual question.
Right.
The tangent being, one thing that I really want to share with all of the parent listeners out there today is that just because your kid goes into one thing doesn't mean your ultimate dream for your kid can't also happen.
Correct.
In addition to doing all of this work, I am actually enrolled at Harvard University pursuing a graduate degree. And that has been an incredible thing to fall into with COVID. I go to the Harvard University Extension School, which is one of the 12 accredited colleges at Harvard. And
where is that?
Huh?
Where is that? Is the
it's
extension?
Harvard. Yeah.
No, but where is it located? The extension.
Well, so it's located on Harvard University.
Oh, it is. Okay.
But the reason I picked it is because most of the coursework is entirely online.
Great.
So I was doing Zoom classrooms for a year before we all went into COVID. And by the time I went into COVID, I was done with all my prerequisites so I could really start the degree. It's been interesting to come into this COVID time as almost a full-time grad student, because a lot of work opportunities are dried up for now because it's not safe.
Right.
But that being said, in addition to schoolwork, I am creating a lot of my own projects. I'm getting into writing, I'm getting into producing, just doing things to continue to tell stories, engage with stories, and create in a way that I think can reach out to a lot of people right now. I think we have an opportunity to be, instead of saying, wow, we're so limited in this way, I prefer to think of it as like, okay, there's a new set of parameters. Like, how are we going to create compelling stories that touch people? Right now, I'm working with a fantastic actor and friend of mine, Ellen McLean. She voiced the villain on a really hit video game called Portal, really well known in the sort of video game world, as it were. So we're working on a 2-woman show that we are going to be streaming on Twitch, and is going to be about mother and daughter having a Zoom call that goes wrong. So, you know, there's ways to, and we're incorporating elements of the pandemic. It's actually a pre-existing play that we're adapting to being a Zoom conversation and changing a lot of the language to make it relevant. So, you know, there's ways to create, and I see so many organizations doing a great job of that right now. I think we just have to change how we get creative.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and it's great that you look at it as an opportunity to get creative. We've been doing a great success online for 7 or 8 years. So people said, well, what are you doing for SAT and ACT prep? And I said, same thing I did with your child 3 years ago. This is your son coming up now, same thing. I'm finding that I'm very patched into a lot of different schools in the area. And they're struggling. People who are the best teachers, phenomenal teachers, can't run the Zoom meeting the way they want. Talk about Zoom calls going wrong. And they can't do it, but it's great that you're adapting, and people are adapting. And I really believe that things will never be the same, even when all this is over, because some companies are finding, I don't need to spend $50,000 a month to rent space for my workers in Manhattan if 80% of them can do the same job from home. You do want that human element. But I think it is speaking so much about some important lessons, especially for our younger viewers, of being able to adapt and change and roll with the punches. So that's great things. And I know you've done so much, but share one major success story with our viewers if you can today.
One major success story. Any sort of particulars that you'd like to hear with the story?
Me, I'm a bit of a stalker. So if it's a story, I want to hear the dirt on some really big stars or stuff like that. But the truth is, whatever you think is successful, whatever made you feel great, successful, happy, some will judge it by, well, I was in a movie, and you might mention, do some name dropping. Some might be, I really didn't think I would get this part, but I did. Or what brought you your definition of a successful story?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I mean, that goes a little bit into how do we define success, right?
Exactly.
Because I think when I was actually just talking to a friend about that this morning, when you define success as being external achievement based, you are setting yourself up to put the definition of your worth in the hands of the public, right? So and I think that's such an important thing to reiterate with parents. It's like, what are we teaching our kids? If we're teaching them, you got to get an A on that paper, you got to get the lead in the school play, you got to be on the football team in a star position, right? Like, I think we're teaching them your worth is not defined by you, your worth is defined by others. And we accidentally raise our children to be paralyzed and a little bit dependent on the world to be able to provide that worth.
Absolutely.
So I think, you know, it's interesting. Last year, I had 2 really major bookings. I booked a supporting role in a new Warner Brothers film. I got to act opposite Denzel Washington, which was a dream come true. That film is coming out in early 2021. And I booked a leading role in an Amazon Prime TV show. And it's like, all of a sudden, I had these 2 things with my acting career that people would define as, well, you did it, kid. Right. Successful. And that is the first time that I was confronted with the reality that those kinds of external achievements actually have no bearing on your identity or your self-worth or your feeling of success. And I'm really fortunate to have that lesson so young in life, because it made me realize, well, technically, this is a success. Technically, yay, I did it. I made it. But in reality, is that easing any of my own internal sense of self? No, it's not. So then it goes to, for me, how I define success is my day-to-day process bringing me joy. I mean, also there is a degree of, am I paying the bills? Like, am I a solvent human? But once we get out of that survival zone, it's like, what can your day-to-day look like that makes you feel excited to get out of bed every morning? That to me is success.
this podcast is for all people, but I have to say, I'm seeing so much female empowerment here because I cannot tell you how many young people in my career do not share your definition of success at all because it's been programmed in them. So I love your answer. And I don't mean to brag, but I'm going to name drop. I brought 66 of my students on 2 buses to see Julius Caesar on Broadway,
Wow.
and starring Denzel Washington. As it turns out, we were in Spring Valley High School as part of the East Ramapo Central School District in Rockland County, New York. They had a tremendous, very successful marching band. The marching band did the Halloween parade in Nyack, New York, in Rockland County. And a director who was doing The Manchurian Candidate, starring Denzel Washington, the remake, saw the band and said they must be in the movie. So they're in the movie. Months and months later, we go to Broadway. I bring these kids. As an English teacher, it was 10th grade class. We were doing Julius Caesar. And all I said was, I'd love the kids to come out and wave a hello to Denzel. I know sometimes people come out, and he was between we saw a matinee, obviously, because it was a school day, and between a matinee and doing the evening show. So he comes out for an hour and 20 minutes in a winter jacket and takes a picture with every single student.
Yeah.
Every single one. So I was the last one. And he said, are you the teacher? And I said, yes. He said, are you teaching them good? I said, actually, I'm teaching them well. And he laughed and said, oh, I make $15 million a picture. And I said, you win. I said, don't worry about it. But he was saying it to me. I never saw anyone stay out that long. And not to demean stardom, you would think he was just some guy on the street who had coffee. And I said, can you take a couple of pictures? He stayed out for so long. So it's just wonderful to hear that name again, and that's the one. And I just love your definition of success. Speaking of that, you're giving back today, but I know you do a lot of community work. Aren't you involved in a couple of community organizations? And if so, what projects have you worked on? What are you working on moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say something quickly about your story that you just shared, which is, I think that we really put stars or successful people or names that we know, like Steve Jobs, for instance, on a pedestal. But at the end of the day, the common denominator between all those people is that they are pure of heart. They are exactly that story that you shared. They are good, loving, open-hearted, open-minded people with a penchant for pursuing their passion. And I think that is the common denominator I've seen with the most successful people. And I think that is the thing that we need to be teaching our kids if we want them to achieve that level. It's not about get that or don't, it's about be the best person you can be. It's that golden rule, lead with love and lead with an open heart and mind. And you would be surprised how much comes your way just with that mindset when you're pursuing passion.
Great lesson. Absolutely. And I think you're helping some people pursue their passion in some of the things you're doing with your organizations. I don't know if it's more than one, but if it is, just mention one that's close to your heart. And that
the biggest thing that's close to my heart is mental health. As somebody who has struggled with her own mental health issues over the years, what I learned from being inside the system is that we just have no standardized mental health care. And I'm sure that there are a lot of listeners out there who can relate and go, well, I have kids who have been struggling and I don't know what to do. And it's wild to me, the gaps that we have in our system. If somebody, child or adult is in crisis, their options are call a hotline, and the hotline can really only do so much.
Correct.
If it's really bad, go to a hospital, and the hospital can do next to nothing. We have outpatient therapeutic care, but that's not always available when people need it. Right. We have a couple more inpatient or hybrid inpatient-outpatient centers, but they're really expensive and insurance rarely covers it. Or we have what ends up happening most of the time, which is people leaning on their support systems when the support systems, be it parents, friends, relatives, what have you, don't have the training for how to handle that. And it is bananas to me that in the year 2020, we still don't have systemic mental health care. We have urgent care, right? If you scrape your knee, if you fall, if you think you have the flu, you can go in and quickly get assessed and quickly get the treatment you need and get out of there. Why don't we have anything like that for mental health? It's bananas. we have the systems, we just haven't applied them because of all the stigma that we have surrounding mental health, of saying, well, it's a personal character flaw rather than it's just as serious as a heart condition. So I am very passionate about partnering with organizations and championing different nonprofits that are all about providing access, affordable, sometimes even free access to mental health care to people who need it the most. Because they're the most vulnerable people in our society. You've got people who they don't always have the energy or even the knowledge to be able to go, well, where do I go for this? So getting those organizations in front of those people so that they can get the help when they need it is so important to me. I think it's hard for us to expect our society to progress much further when we're just dismissing this widespread issue. And you get really sad things like the upward tick in gun violence in this country. You get school shootings, you get upwards of suicide rates, and especially with the depression that is caused by this pandemic. It's a wonder to me that we haven't taken that more seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, I got started this whole business after I wrote a memoir about being diagnosed with epilepsy at the age of 16 and a half in Florida, after I lived in Yonkers, New York for so many years. And I have to tell you that my parents did a great job supporting me, but as far as medical help, they tried to get me the best medical help they could. It wasn't good in Florida, but there was no mental aspect of it. That's where I was suffering the most. And I would argue that with the pandemic, it's creating another pandemic, because I know the help I didn't get and how I had to struggle and finally overcame adversity. But a lot of these people, I mean, I saw when the first month this happened, it didn't even dawn on me. I saw a commercial because alcoholics couldn't go for treatment and couldn't go to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. They weren't set up for Zoom in that way. And things that were bad before the pandemic, what you're just talking about, was made worse tenfold because of not having. So I guess now maybe there'll be a silver lining here, in that we're going to realize how ill-equipped we are and how prepared we are for certain things, especially with regards to mental health. So I'm so happy that that's one of your passions as well. I'm sure there's, even in this time period, there's so many upcoming projects that we should know about. And what upcoming projects do you have, and where can people learn even more about Sheila Houlahan?
Yeah, absolutely. So the easiest way to keep in touch with what I'm doing is to follow me on Instagram, which is just at Sheila Houlahan. I post all of the sort of goings on there, as it were. In terms of things that are coming up, I will say a lot of things are stalled because of the pandemic. Yeah. So in the meanwhile, while that Amazon Prime TV show, we only just finished half of the second season, and we're just itching to get back to filming again. But until things are cleared to safely resume, I will be posting pretty soon information about that Zoom play. I think it's something that people are going to really enjoy. So I would say, stick to that Instagram. It's going to let you know about that project and other upcoming projects that I have. And I would love to be able to share that with everybody.
Absolutely. Outstanding. Sheila, cannot thank you enough for joining us today and sharing your passion, your history. I think people can get so much from your story. So thank you so much. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, our pleasure. Viewers, remember to reach out to us on social media. Look for Grade Success on Facebook and Twitter. We would love to hear from you. You can also find me, Mark Hoberman, on LinkedIn. Again, thanks to Sheila Houlahan for being with us. And viewers, don't forget to tune into our next podcast. This is Mark Hoberman, thanking you for watching the podcast, Lighting the Educational Flame, on the Grade Success Education channel on NETV, and have a great day. Sheila, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you enough. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Lighting the Educational Flame with Mark Hoberman. To contact Mark, email him at info@gradesuccess.com.